we take 6 million bad ads down every single day. Deepfakes is a very big problem, and we've been investing directly and in partnership into technology that can spot deepfakes.
Now I'm curious how Google Thailand deal with this fake news issue. So let's move on to the next speech. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Jacques Sahel at Google Thailand. Hi, Mr. Sahel.
Hello.
Your 15 minutes start now. Over to you.
Thank you very much for having me. Hello, everyone. I will talk to you about Google's overall approach to tackling disinformation. And I'm very glad that we've had Facebook talking before, because I think this is very much a collaborative effort where all of us together can unite and make a difference. So let's go to a few slides that I have prepared to illustrate our approach, please. Let's go straight into it, into the next slide. And we'll start actually with Google's mission, the reason for why Google exists and how it conducts itself since 1998, when the company was created. Our overall mission that guides us in everything that we do in the company, whatever product it is, out of the many products that Google has, is that we want to help organize the world's information and make it accessible and useful universally. So really the key for us at Google is to enable people, users of the internet, to access information, and not just any information, useful, relevant information. So when we talk about misinformation or disinformation, that goes completely against everything that we try to do, which is give access to useful information. So let's move on to the next slide and look at what we mean by mis and disinformation. So misinformation, generally speaking, is propagating false content, but that could be innocent. Someone could just be forwarding something not realizing that it is false content. What is much more harmful potentially is disinformation, which is the intentional, the deliberate propagation of bad news, and that has to be something that we focus on in particular. And this is not new, of course. You know, misusing information, propaganda has existed for a long time, but we have to recognize that those that try to mislead others are trying to use the power of the technology to do that at scale nowadays, and that's what we need to deal with, and we also need to deal with that at scale ourselves. And so in order to deal with this issue, we have put in place a strategy that goes across various pillars. If we go to the next slide, I will detail those. We have invested a huge amount of money and resources generally to develop both technology but also processes, and put in place the people to deal with online safety generally, to protect users against spam, against malware, against content farms. And as part of that work, we very much build on all that to tackle disinformation. And it's very important. I think we're starting to know quite a lot nowadays about disinformation and disinformation using internet technologies. But there is not one silver bullet. There's not one clear solution, but we're making progress. Disinformation takes many shapes, and malicious actors are constantly changing, evolving, refining their techniques. So we too need to adapt and find new ways to counter them. And because there's no one solution to address the issue, we've developed a 5-pronged approach, different tracks to take care about this issue, as a whole. And most of the time, this is not just about us, Google, doing something, it's about doing it in partnership with others in the news ecosystem, whether they are newsrooms or civil society. So first, very important for us is that we need to elevate quality content. We need to make sure that, to the points that have been made earlier, the trustworthy, authoritative sources of content are clearly visible to users. And so we design features in our products to provide context to users throughout their journey or across all our services, so that they are exposed naturally and directly to the right sources of information, or rather to a variety of sources of information, but trying to bring up authoritative, reputed sources. So, for instance, you might have sources like the BBC, which is a reputed organization that has existed for a long time, that has got a history, a heritage of independence and quality. It will come higher up in results of search ranking, search queries, or YouTube search queries than, for instance, a blog that was created 2 days ago by someone that you've never heard of. So that way we're helping users to have more context about the information, the content that they see, so that they can make their mind up, informed by the better sources. And then, of course, we have to take direct action against disinformation and to counter malicious actors and the behaviors that they use to get at our users. So we have put in place user policies, behavioral policies across all our products, whether it's Google Search, Google News, YouTube, or our advertising products. And these policies clearly define and outline behaviors which are prohibited on our platforms. And that includes a number of behaviors which together help or become misinformation and disinformation. Behaviors such as misrepresentation, pretending to be, for instance, an expert, a doctor when you talk about COVID, for instance, when actually you've got no such qualifications. That is a behavior that we will not tolerate on our platform. You have various other such policies that we'll review on the next slide. And we enforce these policies on a daily basis. We take millions of these actions every day across our platform, whether it's search, YouTube, or our ads. And generally speaking, just on ads, for instance, to give you an idea of scale, we take 6 million bad ads down every single day. And we've taken a total of 2.3 billion bad ads down for violating our policies. Now, let's perhaps move on to the next slide where we'll explain a little bit more about the policies. So this is just an example of some of the policies that we have in place relating to misinformation. We have a few more. So I've mentioned already impersonation, claiming to be someone else, or misrepresentation. For instance, that's where the deepfakes would fit in. We've seen a really interesting example earlier in this session about what deepfakes are and how you can misuse even very famous people in the wrong way. Unfortunately, that's being used in advertising as well, for instance. So we take action against that. If you have hateful content, and unfortunately a lot of misinformation or disinformation includes hateful content, we have policies that ban that sort of hate speech. And then when you get to topics like politics and elections, we have a policy specifically to prevent voter suppression when people are trying to circulate fake information about the difficulty of voting or pretending that you can't vote on a particular day or in a particular region. That is clearly prohibited. And there's a number of other policies which exist to counter misinformation, so that when this is spotted, whether it's reported by users or it is identified by automated programs, we can take action according to our policies and take that disingenuous content down. We'll hear a little bit more about that when I talk about COVID in a minute. Next slide, please. Now, crucially also, going back to this idea about, this is not just about negative stuff. This is not just about taking down bad content. This is importantly about empowering the users, giving them context, helping people make their own decisions. So what you will see across our products is that we try to embed, to build in to our products features which give just a little bit of extra information to users. So for instance, if you do a search on a particular topic that is very sensitive, like the landing on the moon, which is something where there's a lot of conspiracy theories about whether or not man landed on the moon, then yes, we will give you access to all the search results that are out there, but we will, for instance, add a label that explains from a very authoritative source what some of the reputable information is on that topic. And we do similar things for COVID, for instance, where we would take information from the World Health Organization, for instance, to identify what is the relevant information about COVID, if that's what you're searching. If we move on to the next slide, we have also part of the empowering users is not just about the features and giving context, it's also about media literacy. And you've heard it from from our colleague from Facebook a minute ago, and I think that's crucial. We need to help people be digitally literate and be media literate so that they understand how to look at information. They need to know how to look at a publisher and understand where the publisher is coming from, what might be the particular line of editorial, or where is the particular perspective come from. And we do this sort of work in partnership with a number of organizations. We use often our philanthropic arm, google.org, or we have our own programs within the main company, and then we partner with a range of associations and organizations, from UN agencies to specialized entities like Pointer, and also on the ground we do a lot of this in Southeast Asia, including Thailand. We have dedicated programs about online safety, which increasingly bring in the angle of misinformation. So we go out there and talk both to young people or to seniors, older citizens, or just as part of lifelong learning in companies, for instance. We help with, here is just one example of the Be Internet Awesome program, which is all about internet safety. And we include increasingly all this information, all the good tips about misinformation, which is, for instance, how to spot a fake fact, or where you can go to try and find out more about fact checking. Let's move on to the next slide. And now let's move on to a key point, a fourth pillar of our approach, which is around collaborations in a news ecosystem. And this word collaboration for me is key when we talk about misinformation. There's a lot of different actors here. We've got users, of course. They're the most important people. It's you and I, we're all users. We've got our own responsibility, and we can all educate ourselves and be better at spotting fake information. But then there's the internet platforms themselves, of course. There's expert entities like CoFact and others, and we partner with a lot of those around the world, both in international programs and in local programs at various levels. It can be about research. So we do technical research, I'll mention that in a minute, but we also do research on very basically on the problem of misinformation, how it affects people, the social effects of it, how to combat it. We also, and importantly, work with third-party organizations to set up the capabilities locally to deal with misinformation. And that's very, very important. We have to have in place a network of stakeholders who care about this issue and work together. We have to have some sort of dialogue where you have a fact-checking capability, for instance, a fact-check center that is talking to journalists and the news media, that are talking to the internet platforms themselves, and we have a regular dialogue. We have the platform for doing the fact-checking. We have the digital platforms doing their own efforts, sometimes coming together on joint programs, for instance, for media literacy. And it's that sort of collaboration at the local level that we need to strengthen, and that is going to really make a difference. And also, importantly, to make a difference for the particular type of misinformation and disinformation that might be affecting the country. The misinformation is a problem that affects everyone, but it sometimes has very peculiar characteristics, be it only languages, simply. There might be dialects, there's the local language, and global organizations may not always be resourced or organized to deal with that local language. So all these perspectives need to be taken into account, and we really need to build that local multi-stakeholder capacity to deal with misinformation. And so we do this regularly, including here in this region. We've conducted a number of media literacy workshops, for instance, in partnership with local actors in Thailand. We work with various actors across Southeast Asia to organize what we call the Trusted Media Summit, which we do in partnership with lots of civil society organizations, with other internet companies and non-governmental expert organizations like First Draft. And I think that's really what I would encourage us to all do more and more today, is to make sure that we have this basic level of capability in place, with actors having a forum to coordinate with one another and to be able to learn from one another and to react very quickly when there are new misinformation or disinformation threats arising. Let me move on to the next slide, almost the end, to talk about the fifth and final pillar of our approach, which is to stay ahead of future threats. And there was a great introduction to it. I don't need to explain this too much now, because it was mentioned in the earlier part of the section. Deepfakes is a very big problem, and we've been investing directly and in partnership into technology that can spot deepfakes, but we're also involved in partnerships to spread the word, to get organized to deal with deepfakes. And there's other examples of emerging practices and methods that malicious actors utilize, whether it's spammy methods, for instance, to distribute their content, or malware-aided ways of distributing the content. And we work with a number of organizations out there in partnership to spot those future threats, to analyze them, to try and get ahead of the curve. And the final slide I wanted to show you, just the next one, please. It's just a quick piece of information on COVID-19. I could have done a whole presentation about what we've done on COVID-19. Unfortunately, there has been a lot of misinformation and disinformation around COVID-19. So we have done our mix of both positive work, highlighting accurate information from the likes of the World Health Organization, and that we've done that across our products, whether it's in Google Search, where you will notice banners giving you the latest advice from the WHO about COVID-19, similar things on YouTube, or on Google News, for instance. There is a dedicated new COVID-19 section. In maps in various countries on Google Maps, you have testing centers for COVID-19 that are clearly marked, for instance. You can find them easily. Nowadays, it's also vaccination centers, etc. And then beside the sort of positive help and safety tips that we've been developing in partnership with expert organizations like WHO and spreading the good word out there, we've been taking action against malicious content. And so we already had policies tackling fake medicines, for instance, and we have refined a policy about health misinformation to make sure that if people were trying to propagate fake information about how to cure the virus, for instance, that would be taken down. Or indeed, recently we've had to deal with a lot of vaccine misinformation. And again, this is clearly prohibited, and we will not hesitate to take action to take down malicious content of that nature, which has got a potential for direct harm. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening to me. And I really want to finish by concluding and saying that I truly think that we're making progress. It's a huge problem. It's a problem that is affecting us as society worldwide. It's in every country in the world that we deal with has to deal with this problem, but we are making progress. We're starting to know how to organize ourselves. And in that sense, gathering like this today are very crucial. We need to have dialogues and bring in all the people that care about this topic together, and to put together very concrete, practical initiatives on the ground to tackle misinformation. We need to have a link between the journalists, the fact-checkers, the internet platforms, the government, and authoritative sources that provide quality information, and we need to work together for the benefit of all to tackle this scourge. And I think we can do it, and we will do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jacques Sahel, for insightful presentation. Like he said, like more cooperation is the key, is the most important, and more stronger also.
วันนี้ขอบคุณทุกท่านสำหรับการติดตามรับชมครับ
Please stay tuned on Spring News social media platform for our virtual forum. Thank you for today. สวัสดีค่ะ
สวัสดีครับ